What's up, everybody? I have sold my last pizza, and so I had planned on taking my recipe, or I should say, it's not a recipe, it's a method for making my pizza dough to the grave, but I've decided to share it with the world, and I do believe that my technique is the easiest, the most consistent, and the most rewarding of all the pizza recipes I've seen on YouTube. I, much like 99.9% of you who are watching this video, learned on YouTube how to make pizza dough, and I made pretty horrendous dough for about 3 years with brief moments of success. I had the great fortune of meeting and getting to know Vito Iacopelli a few years ago when I was a photographer. I did his family portrait, and in the time we spent together, he told me some secrets that completely changed the way I made pizza. And for the first about month of doing my catering and personal chef duties for my clients, I used his recipe, but I kind of felt like a little bit like a fraud, and like I bought like a KFC franchise and they just gave me the 11 herbs and spice recipe. And so I went in my kitchen and I spent about a month and created a recipe that didn't require refrigeration, wasn't a poolish, wasn't a biga, and it was all room temperature and extremely simple and very, very repeatable. And I believe the best pizza I've ever had. Sorry, Vito. No, your pizza's great. I just didn't have I was making over 100 pizzas at a time. I didn't have the refrigeration room to store all the dough. And so out of necessity, I created an all room temperature recipe. So I'm going to try to make this video as concise and short as possible. I don't think it's going to happen. So it's going to be as long as it's going to take. While the method is easy, there are a lot of steps. And if you skip any one of the steps, you'll get pizza, but it either will just be a little bit difficult to work with, or it just won't be as great. And so every one of these steps is simple, but it takes time and a bit of precision. And so let's get to it. So here is everything you'll need to make my recipe. You'll need a waterproof digital scale. I say waterproof because you're going to be measuring water, and I have killed non-waterproof scales before by spilling water on them. So I highly recommend this one I got off Amazon. They're very inexpensive these days, but get a waterproof one. You'll also need a digital scale that goes to the 100th of a gram, and this is going to be for measuring your yeast. You'll need instant yeast. You'll need some ramekins to measure your yeast and salt, a couple of cups to add water at the end of the process, a laser thermometer for measuring the temperature of your dough. I also like using this regular thermometer that uses a rod, because that will give you the exact temperature of the inside of the dough. You'll need some olive oil, a dough scraper, sea salt. I'm doing 15 dough balls today, and so I split the mass into two sections, and I proof them in these two sort of large bowls. If you're doing more than 15, I recommend proofing them in a dough box. And this one is the box we're going to use to proof the dough balls once they're balls. But if you're doing like 30 dough balls, I have a taller dough box, and that's where I proof those. If you're doing 6 dough balls, this is the perfect size proofing box right here. I got this off Amazon. Today we're going to be using a spiral mixer. Spiral mixer is really a game changer for making dough. It really is so much better than a regular like KitchenAid mixer. I wouldn't use a spiral mixer though unless you're doing less than 6 dough balls. It's not really made for small volumes like that. So for 15, this is the least expensive one I found. I think it was $485 off of Amazon. You can buy it directly from Vware also. And I'll explain later why I recommend getting the least expensive mixer, because there is a workaround to avoid the pitfalls that cheaper mixers have. So we're going to be using this. You can make up to 18 or 20 dough balls at one time in this. And this is the least expensive one that I found on Amazon. Okay, so I did this professionally, and so I didn't have any room for error. If you're doing this for fun, you can sort of screw around and see what works. I didn't have that option, because when somebody hires you to feed their once-in-a-lifetime party or their replicatable party, you can't screw up. And so I am obsessed with perfection. And what I haven't seen in, I don't think any video about making pizza dough was all of the things that actually create consistent results. So the number one thing is temperature in the room that you're doing the proofing in. If you can, you want it to be the exact same. It doesn't really matter what the temperature is. It just needs to stay the same temperature from the time you finish making the dough ball mass until the time you're rolling them out and you're proofing all the dough balls. So I keep my house, right now it's December, so the house is 65 degrees. And it doesn't ever get hotter than that or colder than that. What I used to do during summer is if I had to make the dough at 5 o'clock at night, that would be the warmest the house would be at that time. And so I'd find out whatever the warmest was, and I'd turn on the heat to stay that way all through the night and through the next day. So if it was 75 degrees at 5 o'clock at night, I would turn the temperature on to 75 degrees. So at night when it started to dip, it would stay there. So I'd keep the same temperature all day and all night while I was doing my proofing. That, when you don't have that, then you're sort of guessing, oh, it went higher this time, and you're trying to guess, oh, I wanted to proof for 12 hours, but now it got hotter, so it's going to be 11 hours. I've seen a lot of videos where they say, well, wait till the dough doubles in size, whatever that means. Wrong. You want the exact same temperature through the entire process, from making the mass of dough to the dough balls proofing, for the entire 24 hours of this method. The second thing is resting time. People that I've seen, they talk about it will take 20 minutes to make the dough and it will be done at the end of that. With my method, there's a lot of resting time, from the time that you're making it in the mixer to the time you take it out of the mixer to the time that you let it rest outside the mixer as a mass. There's a bunch of different times when the dough balls rest, and it's critical to get consistent results. And so time, temperature, and rest. Those are the most critical things to make absolutely 100% repeatable results for your dough. Otherwise, you're sort of guessing here and there and fudging it, and I'm just not down with that. Okay, so my house is actually 67 degrees right now instead of 65. So I'm gonna set my heat for 67 so it stays that temperature all day and all night. One thing I want to make clear is that there is no one and done recipe for everybody under every circumstance. It all depends on where you live and the humidity of where you live and the temperature of where you live. So I chose a 65% hydration dough ball because where I live in Southern California, right on the beach, is 79% humidity. So if I had chose a 70% hydration dough ball, it would have been a little bit too wet in my opinion. I'm going to start cooking my pizzas tomorrow at 7 p.m. And so this process takes exactly an hour and a half. And so you want to start your dough 25 and a half hours before you plan to start cooking your first pizza. So I'm going to be starting at 5:30, so they will be done and rolled and resting at 7 p.m. And so I can start, I'm going to roll the dough balls at 7 a.m. and then they'll be ready to cook at 7 p.m. This is the only flour I've ever used for making pizza, and this is a personal preference thing. I know some people like to mix two different types of flours together. This is what I like. Okay, so according to Pizza App, for 15 dough balls, you want 2,498 grams of flour. And we're going to weigh that out. Okay, next is the yeast. We want 2.32 grams. Oh, I almost nailed it. Boom, 2.32. We're just going to add that yeast to the bowl of flour. Okay, now we're going to measure the water. And what I do to keep things so simple is I add 97% of the water initially, and then I add 3% later. And that matches up with the calculations for the salt. And so you're looking at the same numbers for the salt and the water, so you don't have to get confused and do some math. Now, going back to what I was saying about the less expensive spiral mixers is the more expensive ones have better gears and they run cooler and they even have like built-in thermometers and stuff like that. But you get the cheaper ones and they do generate more heat. And so in order to offset that, what I like to do is add about 250 grams of ice into the water mix. Okay, 247. And so now we know that the total amount of water we want that's 97% is 1,548 grams. Boom, just like that. Now we're just gonna add all of that water to the mixer. Make sure no ice cubes stick to the bottom. So that's 97% of the water and 100% of the flour and yeast. And we're just going to turn this on until we don't see any shiny water, till it's all absorbed. This process only takes maybe 4 or 5 minutes. If you've used a spiral mixer before, you no doubt have experienced some of the flour not coming off of the edges and you have to reach in there and sort of scrape it off. I found that having the ice cold water and the ice in there really helps congeal or absorb into that dough. And so you don't have to reach in there and keep scraping off bits from the side. It really does come together really nice. Okay, so it's been just a few minutes. I don't see any more ice. It's all pulled nice and clean away from the sides. And it's not shimmery, so that's definitely all nice and absorbed right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set a timer for 45 minutes and just let that sit in the bowl just like that and not disturb it. And then we're gonna come back and have a look and see what it looks like in 45 minutes. What you can do while your dough is resting in the mixer is measure out your salt. So we're going to do the exact same amount, 3%, as we left behind in the water, which is 75 grams. And what I do is I just set that on top of the mixer and it's all ready and waiting for me. Okay, so now we're just going to add 75 grams of water, cold water. Okay, so it's been 45 minutes. And when you see your dough at this point, you'll notice how completely different the texture of it is. All that water is totally absorbed. There's a scientific term for this. I don't know if it's autolyse or autolyse, but that's what's happening is all that gluten is really getting really strong. This is what makes it so you can throw the pizza up in the air and get real strong. It also makes it so it doesn't stick on your workbench and things like that. So at this point, we're going to add that 75 grams of water. And what I like to do is add it in 3 stages. And the reason I use the ice and the water is because this is a less expensive mixer and it can kind of heat up a little bit more. And so this allows you to mix the dough a little bit longer without it getting above the critical temperature of 75 degrees. And then everything kind of goes to hell in a handbasket at that point. So this lets you mix it a little bit longer, slowing down the process with that cold water and making everything come together great. So I add the water in 3 different stages. And all I'm looking for is to not hear that sloshing sound or to see any shiny water. Make sure it's all absorbed before you add the next batch. What I look for is when it starts to fold over and start to really grab and come from the edges again like that. That's when I know it's ready to add the second third of water. Okay, it's looking good, nice and dry. Now what we're going to do in the third step, we're going to add the last third of water. And we're going to add in the salt nice and slowly and evenly so it distributes throughout the whole dough mass. And the reason we add the salt at the end is because adding the salt adds friction. And that will cause the dough to heat up a little bit sooner. So you want to add at the end, not at the beginning, so you can slow down that heating process. So right now, that dough is 66 degrees. So that means it's nice and cool, and we're gonna let it get up to 73, no higher than 75 degrees. So that means we have a good long time for this to mix and really build that gluten strength without overheating. Okay, the temperature on the thermometer, the laser thermometer, says 72 degrees. But sometimes I like to double check and see it's slightly higher on the inside. So that's why it's important to see we almost passed that 75 degrees. So right around 72, 73 degrees, it's a good idea to check with a different thermometer. And we came real close. So 74.7, that is absolutely perfect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a 10-minute wait period just like this. Just let it settle. Okay, it's been 10 minutes and the dough is looking unbelievable. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna do one little quick turn to loosen it up from the sides. And it's ready to take out of there. There's all sorts of little signs that you've done your job right. And one of them is when the bowl is absolutely spotless. There is no residue of any dough loose or dry on the sides. And the bowl is so clean, nothing's sticking, nothing's left behind. That means everything's gone exactly as you wanted. Okay, so now we're gonna remove the dough from the mixer. What I like to do is get my hand right in the middle and pull it up and just cut it from one side and cut it right along the other side. And get this one little piece right here. Then I turn the bowl, and that last little bit should come right out. Just like that. And look at that bowl. I mean, it is so clean. So now that we've got the dough on the bench, what I like to do is grab it from the sides and you slap it and you roll it over. You slap it and you roll it over while you're stretching. So you slap it, grab that bottom end, roll it over and pull to the side. And it very quickly comes together. And you just need to do that like maybe 3 or 4 times. And look how unbelievably smooth and lovely that is already. I mean, it is just so perfect. And then what I like to do is you grab the back end and you pull that leading edge And it just comes together so perfectly smooth, so perfectly strong. And this is an absolutely perfect dough ball. And now this is going to rest for about 15 minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil over the top, rub it in. We're going to take some cling film and just cover it up. And what you're going to notice when we see this in 15 minutes is yet again, the consistency and the texture is going to completely have transformed, and it's really, really getting strong now. And this is one of my favorite transformations from this moment until 15 minutes from now. So we'll see you then. I actually forgot, I want to separate this into 2 different sections for the resting period for the next 12 hours. So I'm going to cut this right in half. And I'm just going to do that one more time. I mean, look how unbelievably smooth and strong this is. It is just so gorgeous.
Cover that up. We'll do the same with the other one. So as you're slapping it, you're pulling it aside and stretching it. And look how smooth that is. So gorgeous. Now you put that hands in the back and keep that leading edge down. So we'll turn. That just tightens at the top. That's all ready to go.
Okay, now we'll wait 15 minutes. Okay, it's been 15 minutes. And yet again, it is completely transformed in this just really lovely, smooth, strong ball. And now we're going to do that slap and fold just a couple more times. And man, the texture has just changed so much. Look how smooth and perfect this is. Now the most important thing with this step is, just like before, we're going to put that leading edge down and pull from the back. But the most important thing to check is once you get the top looking nice and smooth like that, you want to flip it over and see all these little gaps right here? You want to close those up. This is supposed to be like a balloon. And we'll seal all those up. And we're going to pop it in the bowl. And there it will rest for 12 hours. Do the same thing with the other one. Man, this is just a 10 out of 10 how this came out. That leading edge down. So it's nice and smooth and perfect on top. And just look at this. It is absolute perfection. Flip it over. You just pinch together that bottom. Make sure none of that air escapes. And pop it in the bowl. And there we go. Okay, the dough is resting for 12 hours. What we want is for our cheese to rest and drain in a colander for the 24 hours until we're ready to make the pizza. And so what I use is fior di latte. And the difference between fior di latte and the mozzarella that you buy like in a big block is the stuff that comes in that big block has like potato starch and other additives in it that cause it to kind of get burnt and black on the top. And it's not really made for the kind of heat that comes in like the Gozney or like a regular pizza oven. And so this is what I use here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain all the water out of here. And I'm going to show you how I slice up into the size of toppings for the cheese. All right, so this is 3 pounds of mozzarella that comes in this container. What I like to do is cut it in half. And then I have this French fry cutter. And what this does is it makes perfect, uniform size little squares of cheese that they're all the exact same size. So that means they'll all melt the exact same way everywhere on the pizza. And, you know, this is really a personal preference thing, where I used to cut kind of just little slices out of the mozzarella and have like nice little circles on the pizza. That's fine. I just found that this is the easiest way to distribute the cheese all around the pizza and have it melt the exact same way. So you're gonna have like big fat pieces and little skinny pieces, and having them have various degrees of meltingness. And so I go through the whole container just like this, and then I'll show you how I drain them when I'm done. Okay, we're all done cutting the mozzarella. And now what we're going to do is just going to pour that right into the colander with a bowl underneath. And it's going to catch all that water that's going to drain out of there. And you're going to be shocked, if you've not done this before, how much water ends up in that bowl that is not going to end up on your pizza. And this will stay in the refrigerator for 24 hours till just before you're getting ready to cook. And it is a total game changer, not just using the Fior latte, but draining it properly for 24 hours before you cook. Okay, and it goes into the fridge, uncovered, over that bowl for 24 hours. Major game changer. All right, everyone, it is 7 a.m. and this dough has been proofing for 12 hours, and it really is looking fantastic. Nice and airy, little bubbles. So all you do is you just lay it out on your bench. Flip it over. And it is so strong and so nice. And one of the signs that you know you've done your proofing right is there should be pretty much zero residue on the bench when you're done with this, done rolling the balls. When you're rolling the balls and there's stuff sticking to the bench and stuff left behind, that means it hasn't proofed right, or the gluten strength wasn't built properly. I have had that happen a bunch of times where my hands are all gooey and there's dough left everywhere, and this means that it's absolutely perfect. So we had measured out in the pizza app for these to be 280 grams. In my experience, I've always ended up just shy of that for the total, and especially when you're making 30 or 100 dough balls, if you're off by 1 gram for every dough ball, by the time you get to the end, you're missing half a dough ball. And so I like to measure these out to 279 grams. And so I can pretty much eyeball at this point what 279 grams is. But again, I don't like to guess. I know a lot of people like to just grab a wad of the dough and squeeze it into a ball. I like things to be exact, so measure out 279. Okay, so there it is, 279 grams. So here's what I do. I take that dough And same as before, I slap and fold and stretch. And it comes together real fast. And so just like it did when there was a giant dough mass, grab that leading edge and you roll it. You roll it until it's nice and real tight on top. Then what I like to do is make like a cup with my hands and just roll like this to really seal up that bottom. And same as before, you want that bottom to have no openings in it, and you keep like a balloon. So what I like to do is set those dough balls aside and let them rest for the length of time it takes me to roll the rest of the dough balls, like maybe half the batch. And then I do one last little roll. And that little resting period I found really does help a lot in the integrity of the dough ball. 275, 276, 279. Okay, so you're just taking that mass. Remember, we're going to keep this side, the top side on top. You want that smooth side on top, so remember which is which. So you just slap it, stretch to the side, turn it, slap it, stretch to the side. Now again, this is another preference situation. There is no one way to roll a dough ball. I know a lot of people like to take all this and kind of fold it and roll it until you just squeeze out one big ball. To me, I've never been able to estimate that within 10 grams or 15 grams accurately. And like I said, if you're trying to get an exact number of dough balls, especially when you're using the pizza app, it's designed to give you exactly to the gram the number of dough balls that you calculated for. And so if you're just sort of guesstimating on the size of the ball, you're going to be all over the place by the end of 15 balls. If you're off by 10 grams each ball, you're going to be missing 150 grams on that last ball, right? Okay, so I've done my initial roll on half the dough balls. So this is the first one. And what I like to do is just take that and do that pull on that leading edge and just tighten it up. I find that that little resting period of just about 4 or 5 minutes really helps to strengthen it up. This is maybe just not a totally definite for sure you have to do it step, but I like to do it. I just found that the dough ball stays, it keeps its shape a little better in the dough box and doesn't spread out. Look how beautiful that is. And you want to put it right, you want it to have something to lean up against, so you put it right in that corner. So you just pull, holding that leading edge down, creating tension on the top. And I added this step maybe halfway into my time doing this for a living. And you know, you're always learning little tricks here and there. It's one of my favorite little things I discovered because it really did help with keeping the shape and keeping the dough balls from all sort of slopping together in the box. And notice how there is absolutely no residue being left behind on the bench from these balls. That's how you know that they've been mixed the right amount of time and the autolyse has done its job, because nothing is coming off these dough balls. There's zero residue. What you're doing in this step is just making sure the top is nice and pulled real tight. It's going to keep that shape of the dough ball really nice to have a nice surface to put your toppings on when you're ready to cook. go. So it's super important. This is half the dough. Put that lid on. Air is the enemy of dough balls in this resting period. So if you can find a box, this is a Cambro box, it's what it's made for. But I found even if you just have a little corner that's like that, it really wreaks havoc on your dough balls while they're resting for this next 12 hours. So I want to make sure you have something with a nice tight lid. I'm going to roll the rest of the dough balls and I'll get back to you. I wanted to show you guys how much the last dough ball measures out to. I did all of them 279 grams, except for two. I did two of them as 280 grams. And so let's see how much this last one weighs out to. Oh, okay, so it's 288. So I do have a little bit extra. Instead of 280, it's 288. That means I have 8 extra grams. It's always better to have too much than too little. So if this is 8 grams under, not like it's gonna make a world of difference, but I'd rather have 8 grams over. So having shaved off 1 gram from every single dough ball, it ended up being 8 grams over. So there you go. I want you to notice the cleanliness of the workbench. There is not one single solitary bit of residue left in these dough balls, and that's one of those signs that lets you know that you did your job exactly right. So there we have it. All our dough balls are in. I cover that up tight. And we'll see them in 12 hours. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. This is the current state of the inside of the oven. And I see a lot of people asking, how do I clean the stone? I'm just going to turn this on for an hour before my cooking starts. And this will be looking absolutely brand new, doing nothing else to it. All this stuff just turns to ash. There we go. The other thing too, I've seen people complain about the cost of this door, the new TU door. This thing is an absolute game changer. It cuts down the heating time by probably half, and it allows you to keep your the level of your gas at below medium always. You don't ever have to turn it all the way up with the door. I mean, it just retains so much heat in there. It's invaluable. It could cost double and I'd still pay for it. So this is the only part of my video that isn't to the letter exactly how I normally make my pizza, but it's a nominal difference. So normally I buy whole peeled tomatoes and crush them by hand. These are just crushed tomatoes, the exact same kind of tomatoes from San Marzano. The thing that I want to emphasize is that you just don't want to blend your tomatoes, because that, I mean, this might be something that almost nobody could actually tell the difference, but I think it does make a difference. Crushing with your hand and keeping nice big chunks for like those flavor pops does something to build flavor more than destroying the tomato with a blender. So this is a 28-ounce can. What I do is I just add 2 teaspoons per 14 ounces of salt. And that's the only thing I add to my tomatoes. I don't do oregano. I don't do olive oil. I don't do pepper. I don't do any of that. I just add salt. And this will be able to make between 12 and 15 pizzas with 28 ounces. So I'm making a certain number of pizzas tonight that don't require a sauce. So that's why I was comfortable making this amount of sauce for 15 pizzas, because at least 3 or 4 of them aren't going to have sauce. So just San Marzano tomatoes crushed. You can buy them crushed or crush them yourself. And just 1 teaspoon of sea salt per 14 ounces. Just a quick update. I started the fire at 6 o'clock. It's now 6:11. And you can see the temperature is already to 710 degrees. Now, that's nice, it gets that hot, but the really important thing is your stone temperature, because the temperature I cook at is going to be about 850 to 875. But that stone temperature is the most important thing, because if that top is hot and the stone is cold, the top's going to cook much faster than the bottom, and then you're going to have less than perfect pizza. So just an update, that's why this door is worth it. After 11 minutes, it's already up to 720 degrees. All right, for the basil, the most important thing about basil is you want to make sure that when it's resting in your station, it's just in water. So Trader Joe's, I believe, is the best place to buy basil. It's 4 ounces for what, like $3 or something like that. So all I do is I pluck off the leaves and put it in a salad spinner, give it a rinse, and then fill the bowl back up with water, and I just leave it right in there for my service. And that's it. You just want to make sure you rinse it, because there's, some sort of weird powder, who knows what road these plants travel to get to where they are. So you just want to give them a good rinse and serve clean food to your guests. All right, it's 6:30, so I'm going to go ahead and put my cheese in my condiment container. And I want you to see how much water is in this bowl that is not going to be on your pizzas. That's a significant amount of moisture that makes a soggy pizza that's no longer going to be there. So this rest period in the refrigerator 24 hours is invaluable. All right, it's 6:37 and we're at 955 degrees. I'm going to get this up to about 1100, I think, just to get that stone really, really pristine and clean. And my guests are arriving at 7, so it's going to be perfect timing. And then what I do is once I get up to about 1100, I turn it all the way down, because that stone is going to be way too hot. So I turn it all the way down and get that stone to the right temperature, and then just bring the heat back up to about medium, and that should just keep me right at the right temperature, right where I want to be. Okay, it's been 55 minutes and we're at 1039 degrees. And look how absolutely pristine that floor is. You don't need to scrub it, you don't need to do anything. And so the floor temperature right now is 918 degrees. And so that's gonna be just right if I just turn down the heat all the way down. Then in about 5 minutes, this temperature will be right around, hopefully about 875. The floor temperature will be about 775, and that's the perfect cooking temperature. Okay, I've got an order for a pepperoni now. So I'll show you how I put on my sauce. So all around the sides, separate. On the last side, I like to make it a little bit more of a rectangle. A little bit extra when you shove it under. Boom. Comes out so clean. Boom, just like that. Just about 3/4 of a spoon of sauce. I don't like a ton of sauce, but I do like it to be somewhat chunky. A little bit of Parmesan. I go back and forth between what the Restaurant Depot has in stock. So these are giant pepperonis. What I like to do is tear them in quarters and spread them so every inch of the pizza is covered. Then we got it's always easier to do your final stretch after the toppings are on there, so it sort of weighs it down. So grab those top two edges, pull it to the width of the peel. And I don't add olive oil generally to when there's pepperoni, because there's already a decent amount of grease coming out of that pepperoni. I don't think it needs to be more wet than that. So I just do it just like this. Okay, the top of the oven temperature is 850. The floor temperature is 775. Absolutely perfect. All the way to the back, as far from the flame as you can. And one big pull. That door on there. Again, you shouldn't have to turn it more than 4 times. So I'm just looking at that left edge. Once that left edge looks exactly how I want it to look when it's done, that's when I turn it. Quarter turn. The oven temperature is dipping quite a bit. It's about 805 right now. As long as it doesn't get below about 750 by the time I'm done with the pizza, everything will be fine. Remember, the sides after the first side are going to cook quite a bit faster. The first side is usually about 45 seconds. The second, third, and fourth side are only about maybe 15, 20 seconds each. And that is it. How pretty is that?
Yum.
Well, that's it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. I just want to remind you all that this isn't the way to make a pizza. This is my way to make a pizza. Also, this is how I made it under the exact circumstances of my temperature of the house, the humidity of where I live, and it all changes based on where you live. So play with my technique, make your adjustments, and have some fun.